The witch queen pretended to sleep, testing the janitor she suspected of treason. But when he knelt beside her and whispered, "I know you're afraid. You don't have to do this alone," she froze. No one knew her powers were failing. No one except the single dad with calloused hands who somehow saw straight through her crown. The candles in the throne room flickered as Serafina pressed her fingertips against her temples. Another headache. Another night where her magic felt like water slipping through a cracked cup. She was the Witch Queen. She ruled 3 kingdoms. She commanded storms and bent reality with a whisper. And she was dying. Not quickly, not dramatically, just slowly fading, like ink left too long in the sun. "Your Majesty," Captain Maris entered through the side door, her silver armor gleaming in the low light. Another incident in the East Wing. Student collapsed during meditation practice. The healing ward says her magical core was drained. Serafina didn't look up. How many does that make? 17 in 3 weeks. 17. All students. All young witches whose magic vanished overnight, leaving them hollow and weak. The healers couldn't explain it. The council blamed stress. The parents threatened to pull their children from the academy. And Serafina felt her own power slipping away at the exact same pace. "There's a pattern, Captain." Serafina finally lifted her gaze. Her violet eyes looked exhausted. Every incident happens late at night, between midnight and dawn. When the castle is quiet, we've doubled the night guard. It's not enough. Serafina stood, her black gown trailing across the marble floor. Someone is inside these walls. Someone who knows exactly when to strike. Maris hesitated. The council suggested it might be you. Serafina's jaw tightened. They think I'm draining my own students. They think your power is unstable, that you're losing control without realizing it. The words hit harder than Serafina expected because part of her wondered if they were right. She'd been waking up exhausted, with no memory of the night before. Her spells misfired. Her protection wards felt paper-thin. What if she was the threat? "There's one more thing," Maris said quietly. "Every incident occurs during the same shift, when the new janitor is working." Serafina's eyes sharpened. The single father, Evan Thorne, started 3 weeks ago. Works midnight to dawn, cleaning the restricted sections of the castle. He's always alone, always in the right place at the right time. Has he been questioned?
Twice.
Both times he had a perfect explanation. He's just
Cleaning.
never goes where he shouldn't. Never touches anything magical. The truth detection spells showed nothing. Serafina moved to the window, staring out at the moonlit academy grounds. Evan Thorne. She'd seen him once in passing, tall, quiet, with tired eyes and calloused hands. He had a daughter, a little girl who waited for him outside the gates every morning. He didn't look dangerous. But then again, the most dangerous people never did. "I want to see him," Serafina said suddenly. Maris frowned. "Your Majesty, if you confront him directly." "I won't confront him." Serafina's mind was already turning. "I'll test him." "Test him how?" Serafina smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Tonight, I'll be in this throne room when his shift begins. I'll pretend to fall asleep. If he's innocent, he'll clean and leave. If he's guilty, he'll try something," Maris finished. "Exactly." Maris looked uneasy. "And if he's more dangerous than we think? If he tries to hurt you while you're vulnerable?" Serafina's hand glowed faintly with violet light. "Then he'll learn why I'm called the Witch Queen." 2 hours later, Serafina sat alone in the throne room. The guards had been dismissed. The doors were locked from the inside, but she'd left them enchanted to open for the janitor's master key. She draped herself across the throne, her head tilted back, her breathing slow and steady. Her hand rested loosely on the armrest, her fingers slightly curled. To anyone watching, she looked deeply asleep. But beneath her closed eyelids, Serafina's senses were razor-sharp. She felt every shift in the air, every vibration in the stone floor. Her magic coiled beneath her skin, ready to strike. The clock tower chimed midnight. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Serafina's pulse quickened, but she kept her breathing even. The door creaked open. The footsteps entered, steady, unhurried, accompanied by the soft sound of a cleaning cart rolling across marble. She heard him pause. Then the footsteps came closer. Serafina's fingers twitched, ready to summon fire. She felt him stop just a few feet away. Felt him standing there, watching her. This was it. This was the moment he'd reveal himself. He'd reach for her magic, try to drain her while she was defenseless. But he didn't. Instead, she heard him kneel. And then, so quietly she almost missed it, he whispered, "I know you're afraid." Serafina's entire body went rigid. Her heart slammed against her ribs. "How?" "You don't have to do this alone," Evan continued, his voice barely above a breath. "Whatever's happening to you, you don't have to carry it by yourself." Serafina's mind spun. He wasn't threatening her. He wasn't trying to steal her magic. He was offering her comfort. But how did he know? How could he possibly know that she was terrified, that her magic was failing, that she felt like she was drowning in a role too big for her? No one knew that. Not even Maris. She felt something warm settle over her shoulders, his jacket. He'd covered her like she was someone fragile, someone worth protecting. Then his footsteps retreated. The cleaning cart rolled away. The door closed softly. And Serafina sat frozen on her throne, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She waited 5 full minutes before opening her eyes. The throne room was empty.
Clean.
Untouched. And on the armrest beside her, barely visible in the candlelight, was a small folded note. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. Inside, in neat handwriting, were 4 words. "Your wards are failing." Serafina's blood turned to ice. He knew. The janitor knew everything. Serafina stared at the note until the words blurred. "Your wards are failing." She crushed the paper in her fist, violet sparks crackling between her fingers. The note disintegrated into ash, but the message burned into her mind. How did a janitor, a human janitor with no magical training, know her protection wards were crumbling? Those wards were ancient spells woven into the castle's foundation. Only the most powerful witches could sense their deterioration. Unless he was the one breaking them. Serafina stood abruptly, her gown sweeping across the floor as she moved to the window. Outside, she could see Evan's silhouette crossing the courtyard toward the east wing, his cleaning cart rattling behind him. She should call the guards. Have him arrested. Interrogated. But something stopped her. "I know you're afraid." Those words echoed in her chest like a bell. Not a threat. Not manipulation. Genuine concern. Serafina pressed her palm against the cold glass. When was the last time someone had spoken to her like that? Like she was a person, not a crown? Like she was allowed to be frightened?
Years.
Maybe never. She pulled her hand back and noticed her fingers trembling. The violet glow that usually surrounded them flickered weakly, like a candle in the wind. She was losing control faster than she'd admitted to anyone. And somehow Evan Thorne knew. Serafina made a decision. She would follow him, watch him, see exactly what he did during those midnight hours when students collapsed and magic bled from the castle walls. She wrapped herself in a concealment spell, a thin veil of shadow that made her nearly invisible, and slipped out of the throne room. The spell took more effort than it should have. Sweat beaded on her forehead. She followed Evan's path through the castle, staying far enough behind that he wouldn't sense her presence. He moved with quiet efficiency, mopping floors, emptying waste bins, straightening furniture that students had knocked askew. Nothing unusual. Nothing suspicious. But then he stopped outside the library's restricted section, the vault where the academy kept dangerous spellbooks and cursed artifacts. Serafina's breath caught. The vault door was sealed with 7 different enchantments. Only senior witches could open it. Evan reached for the handle. Serafina's hand glowed with defensive magic, ready to strike. But he didn't open the door. Instead, he pressed his palm flat against the wood and closed his eyes. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Evan pulled his hand back and shook his head, looking troubled. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket and wrote something down before moving on. Serafina stood frozen in the shadows. He hadn't tried to break in, hadn't stolen anything. He just touched the door, like he was feeling for something. What was he doing? She followed him through 3 more floors. Each time, he paused at magically significant locations: the potion laboratory, the divination tower, the chamber where students practiced combat spells. Each time, he pressed his hand against the wall or door, closed his eyes, and wrote in his notebook. Never breaking in, never stealing.
Just sensing.
By the time Evan finished his shift and headed toward the servants' exit, dawn was breaking over the mountains. Serafina watched from a 3rd-floor window as he met his daughter outside the gates. The little girl, Lily, if Serafina remembered correctly, ran to him with a bright smile. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, with wild brown curls and a patched dress that had been mended too many times. Evan knelt and hugged her tightly, like he'd been away for months instead of hours. Serafina felt an unexpected pang in her chest. When was the last time someone had hugged her like that? Lily said something that made Evan laugh, a real, warm sound that carried across the courtyard. Then she held up a small flower, probably picked from the academy gardens. Evan took it carefully and tucked it behind her ear. They walked away hand in hand, and Serafina realized she'd been holding her breath. This was the dangerous criminal draining her students? This exhausted father, who worked all night so his daughter could eat. It didn't make sense. Unless... Serafina's eyes widened. Unless he wasn't a threat at all. Unless he was investigating the same thing she was. She thought about the notebook. The way he'd touched the vault door like he was searching for something. The note he'd left her. Not a threat, but a warning. Your wards are failing. He wasn't breaking them. He was trying to tell her someone else was. Serafina's heart pounded as the pieces clicked together. If Evan had been sensing magical disturbances, documenting them, trying to figure out where the attacks were coming from, then she'd just spent an entire night suspecting her only potential ally. She needed to know more about Evan Thorne, not as a suspect, as a partner. But first, she needed to understand how a human man with no magical training could sense things that even she, with centuries of power, had missed. Serafina turned from the window, her mind racing. Tomorrow, she would investigate Evan properly. And if he truly was trying to help, she would owe him an apology. Or possibly her life. Serafina didn't sleep. By the time the council convened at dawn, she'd already compiled everything she needed. Captain Maris stood at attention beside the throne, holding a thin folder that somehow felt heavier than it should. Tell me everything, Serafina said. Maris opened the folder. Evan Thorne, 32 years old. Born in Millbrook, a village 2 days' ride from here. No criminal record.
No magical bloodline.
He's worked as a farmhand, a blacksmith's apprentice, a stable keeper, and now a janitor. Why so many jobs? He goes wherever pays enough to support his daughter. After his wife died, he became Maris hesitated, obsessive about keeping Lily safe. He only takes night work, so he can be with her during the day. Serafina felt that uncomfortable pang again. How did his wife die? Maris flipped a page, and her expression darkened. House fire. 3 years ago. But here's where it gets strange. The fire occurred near an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Millbrook. Local authorities found evidence of an illegal dark magic ritual site inside. Serafina's spine straightened. What kind of ritual? Soul extraction. Someone was trying to harvest life force from unwilling victims. Evan's wife, Clara, was a healer. Witnesses say she went into the warehouse when she heard screaming. The fire started minutes later. Evan ran in after her. And Clara died.
Evan survived Marish met Serafina's gaze.
Your Majesty, the warehouse was completely engulfed. The temperature was hot enough to melt iron. 12 people died that night. Evan Thorne walked out with his daughter and barely a scratch. Serafina's blood ran cold. That's impossible. Unless someone protected him, Maris finished. The investigators suspected Clara used her last spell to shield them, but there's no way to prove it. Evan refused to speak about what happened inside. He just took Lily and disappeared for 2 years. Where did he go? No one knows. He resurfaced 6 months ago, working odd jobs, never staying anywhere long. Maris closed the folder. Until he came here. Serafina stood and walked to the window. The academy grounds looked peaceful in the morning light, but she could feel the decay underneath, magic slowly bleeding away, like a wound that wouldn't close. He's running from something, she said quietly. Or searching for something, Maris countered. Serafina made her decision. I'm going to the village. I want to see him outside these walls. Your Majesty, if he's dangerous. Then I'll handle it. Serafina's eyes flashed violet. But I don't think he is. I think we're missing something. An hour later, Serafina stood in the village market disguised as a common traveler. She traded her gown for a simple brown cloak, her crown for a hood that shadowed her face. The market buzzed with morning activity, farmers selling vegetables, bakers hawking fresh bread, children chasing each other between stalls. And there, near the fountain, sat Evan and Lily. They shared a small loaf of bread between them, tearing off pieces and eating slowly, like they wanted to make it last. Lily chattered excitedly about something, her hands waving in animated gestures. Evan listened with complete attention, smiling at her stories even though exhaustion lined his face. Serafina moved closer, pretending to examine a fruit stand while keeping them in her peripheral vision. Papa, can I get a ribbon? Lily pointed to a merchant selling colorful hair accessories. Just a small one? Evan checked his coin purse and winced. Not today, little bird. Maybe next week. Lily's face fell, but she nodded quickly. That's okay. I don't really need 1 inch. The resignation in that small voice broke something in Serafina's chest. Then Lily's head snapped up, her eyes widening. She grabbed Evan's arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. Papa, she whispered, her voice suddenly frightened. Something's wrong. Evan's expression shifted instantly from gentle father to alert guardian. What do you feel? Shadows. Moving on the walls. They're hungry. Serafina's breath caught. She looked at the castle in the distance. The walls looked normal to everyone else in the market. But when she focused her magical sight, she saw them. Thin tendrils of darkness creeping along the stone like veins of poison. How could a 7-year-old child see that? Evan pulled Lily close, his jaw tight. How many? More than yesterday. Papa, they're getting stronger. I know, sweetheart. I know. Serafina watched, stunned, as Evan scanned the castle walls with the eyes of someone who'd been tracking this threat for a while. His hand rested protectively on Lily's head, and Serafina suddenly understood. He wasn't investigating the academy out of curiosity. He was trying to protect his daughter from whatever darkness was growing inside those walls. Before Serafina could decide whether to reveal herself, Lily turned and looked directly at her. The little girl's eyes, bright hazel a moment ago, glowed faintly silver. The queen is here, Lily whispered. Evan stiffened. His gaze swept the market and locked onto Serafina's hooded figure with unsettling precision. For 3 heartbeats, they stared at each other across the crowded square. Then Evan stood slowly, keeping Lily behind him, and mouthed 2 words. Tonight. Guard. Before Serafina could respond, he took Lily's hand and disappeared into the crowd. Serafina stood frozen, her mind reeling. That little girl had magical sensitivity that shouldn't exist in a human child. And Evan had just invited her to a private meeting. She should refuse. Bring guards. Approach this strategically. But instead, she found herself thinking. Finally, answers. The garden was empty when Serafina arrived. Moonlight filtered through the willow trees, casting silver shadows across the stone pathways. The air smelled of jasmine and night-blooming roses, but underneath it, Serafina detected something else.
Decay.
Like fruit rotting from the inside out. The Academy's magic was dying faster than she'd thought. You came alone, Evan's voice came from behind her. Serafina spun, magic crackling at her fingertips. He stood in the archway, hands visible and empty, his expression calm. Should I have brought guards? She asked coldly. Probably. Evan stepped into the garden, and Serafina noticed he looked even more exhausted than before. But you didn't because you're starting to realize I'm not your enemy. I haven't decided what you are yet. Fair enough. Evan sat on a stone bench, the weariness in his movement catching Serafina off guard. He wasn't acting like someone confronting royalty. He was acting like someone too tired to pretend anymore. Serafina remained standing, keeping distance between them. How did you know I was afraid? In the throne room. Evan was quiet for a moment. I can feel things. Emotions.
Pain.
Especially when someone's trying very hard to hide it. That's not possible. You're human. I know, he laughed, but there was no humor in it. Believe me, my life would be a lot simpler if I wasn't. Explain. Evan rubbed his face. After the fire, after Clara died, something changed in me. I started sensing things I shouldn't be able to sense. Emotional pain feels like heat on my skin. Magical imbalance feels like static electricity. Fear tastes like copper in my mouth. Serafina's eyes narrowed. You're empathic. If that's what you want to call it, Evan met her gaze steadily. When I walked into that throne room and saw you pretending to sleep, I felt your terror so strongly I could barely breathe. You're not just afraid, Your Majesty. You're drowning in it. The accuracy of his words hit Serafina like a physical blow. She wanted to deny it, to hide behind her crown and authority. But what was the point? My magic is failing, she said quietly. It's been draining away for months. I wake up weaker every day, and I don't know why. Evan nodded slowly. It's not just you. The entire academy is being drained. Someone's siphoning magic from this place like blood from a wound. And you know this how? Because I've been tracking it. Evan pulled out his worn notebook. Every night, I check the magical pressure points in this castle. The vault, the potion labs, the divination tower. They're all weakening in the same pattern, slowly, systematically, like someone's carefully unraveling a tapestry thread by thread. Serafina's mind raced. Why didn't you report this? To who? Your council thinks I'm a suspect. Your guards watch me like I'm about to steal the silverware. And you? Evan's voice softened. You've been so busy trying to appear strong that you haven't noticed you're collapsing. The words stung because they were true. Before Serafina could respond, footsteps pounded on the garden path. Lily burst through the archway, her face pale and her small body shaking. Tears streamed down her cheeks.
Papa.
She ran straight to Evan, who caught her and pulled her close. Lily, what's wrong? You were supposed to stay at the inn. I saw them again, Lily's voice trembled. The shadows. They're crawling around the castle walls.
So many of them now.
They're trying to get inside. Serafina stepped forward, her protective instincts overriding her suspicion. Lily, where exactly did you see them? The little girl looked up at her with those unnaturally perceptive eyes. Everywhere, but they're strongest near the big tower with a silver door. Serafina's blood turned to ice. The royal spell vault. Evan was already on his feet. Your Majesty, you need to reinforce the protection barrier. Tonight. If those shadow spirits break through. Shadow spirits? Serafina stared at him. How do you know what they are? Because they're the same things that attacked the warehouse where Clara died. Evan's voice was rough. They feed on fear and magical energy. Once they breach a barrier, they don't stop until they've consumed everything. Lily whimpered, and Seraphina saw the child's hands glowing faintly, the same silver light she'd seen in the market. Pop, it hurts. The shadows hurt. I know, sweetheart. I know. Evan looked at Seraphina desperately.
Please.
I know you don't trust me. I know this sounds insane. But my daughter can sense magical threats that witches can't detect. She's been seeing these shadows for weeks. That's impossible, Seraphina breathed. She's human. She shouldn't be able to. She shouldn't be alive. Evan interrupted. Clara used the last of her magic to save us from that fire. To shield us. I think some of that protection transferred to Lily. Changed her somehow. Seraphina looked at the trembling child, at the desperate father, at the shadows she could now see creeping along the distant castle walls. Every instinct screamed this was a trap. But a quieter voice, the one that had heard genuine concern in Evan's whisper, told her something else. He's telling the truth. Come with me, Seraphina said suddenly. Both of you. If shadow spirits are gathering at the vault, I need to see it myself. Evan hesitated. Your guards will think. I don't care what they think, Seraphina's eyes blazed violet. If my academy is under attack, I want answers.
Now.
They didn't make it to the vault. Halfway across the courtyard, the sky turned black. Not the natural darkness of night. This was something else. Something wrong. The stars disappeared behind a spreading stain of shadow that moved like oil across glass. Lily screamed. Papa, they're coming through. Seraphina looked up and felt her heart stop. The protective barrier around the academy, the ancient spell that had stood for 300 years, was cracking. Fissures of darkness spread across the invisible dome like a shattered mirror. And pouring through those cracks came the shadows. They weren't solid. They moved like smoke given shape and hunger, twisting forms with too many limbs and eyes that gleamed like distant stars. The temperature dropped so fast that Seraphina's breath misted in the air. Get inside, Seraphina shouted, already weaving defensive spells with her hands. Now, but the shadows were faster. 3 of them descended on the entrance to the student dormitories. The doors exploded inward, and screams erupted from inside. Evan didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lily, thrust her toward Seraphina, and ran toward the dormitory. What are you doing? Seraphina yelled. You're human. You can't. Evan ignored her and disappeared through the smoking doorway. Seraphina stood frozen for one precious second, between protecting Lily and helping the students, before instinct took over. She threw a shield spell around the little girl, anchoring it to the courtyard stones. Stay here. Don't move. Then she ran after Evan. Inside the dormitory, chaos reigned. Students fled in every direction, their faces pale with terror. The shadow creatures moved through the hallways like hunting wolves, feeding on fear. Every time a student screamed, the shadows grew larger, more solid. Seraphina saw one creature corner 3 first-year students against a wall. She hurled a bolt of pure light at it. The shadow shrieked and recoiled, but didn't dissipate. Stronger than she expected. Much stronger. Through the smoke and panic, she spotted Evan. He was carrying an unconscious girl over his shoulder while guiding 2 younger boys toward the exit.
No magic.
No weapons. Just a tired janitor protecting children with his own body. A shadow creature dropped from the ceiling directly above him. Evan! Seraphina's warning came too late. The creature struck, but Evan spun, shielding the students with his back. The shadow's claws raked across his shoulders, and he gasped in pain but didn't fall. Seraphina blasted the creature with fire, forcing it back long enough for Evan to get the students to safety. He collapsed against the wall, breathing hard, blood seeping through his torn shirt. You're insane, Seraphina said, reaching his side. Yeah, Evan coughed. I get that a lot. A new sound cut through the chaos. Footsteps on the main staircase. Captain Maris and the royal guard finally arrived, along with 3 council witches whose hands glowed with combat magic. Your Majesty, Maris shouted. The creatures are. Everywhere, I know. Serafina helped Evan to his feet. We need to evacuate the students and collapse the barrier inward. Contain them. One of the council witches, Master Aldrich, stepped forward. If we collapse the barrier, we trap ourselves inside with those things. We're already trapped, Serafina snapped. At least this way we control the battlefield. But before anyone could respond, a pulse of dark energy exploded from the direction of the spell vault. The entire castle shook. And then the shadow creatures stopped attacking. They all turned, in perfect unison, and began flowing toward the vault like water finding a drain. They're not random, Evan breathed, his eyes widening. They're being directed. Serafina's stomach dropped. Someone's controlling them. Another pulse. Stronger this time. The walls cracked, and students screamed as the floor buckled beneath their feet. Maris grabbed Serafina's arm. Your Majesty, we need to fall back. No, Serafina's voice was steel. If they reach the vault, they'll consume the kingdom's entire magical reserve. We make our stand here. She turned to the council witches. Combine your power with mine. We create a wall of light. Nothing gets through. Master Aldrich looked terrified. Your Majesty, in your condition? I don't care. Serafina's hands blazed violet. We fight.
Now.
The witches linked hands, channeling their magic into a unified spell. Light erupted from their combined power, forming a barrier across the hallway. The shadow creatures slammed into it like a tidal wave hitting a cliff. For a moment, the barrier held. Then Serafina felt her magic sputter. Her vision blurred. The drain on her already failing power was too much. I can't, her knees buckled. Strong hands caught her. Evan's hands. I've got you, he said quietly. And then something impossible happened. When Evan touched her, Serafina felt strength flowing back into her body. Not magic, something else. Something warm and steady, like a candle flame that refused to go out. His empathic ability wasn't just sensing emotions. It was sharing them. Sharing strength. How are you doing this? She whispered. I have no idea, Evan admitted. But don't let go. With Evan's support anchoring her, Serafina poured everything she had into the barrier. The light intensified, pushing the shadows back, inch by inch. But in the distance, from the direction of the vault, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Laughter. Human, not shadow. Someone was laughing as the academy burned. And Serafina suddenly realized with terrible clarity, the attack was a distraction. Someone wanted them all focused on the shadows while the real threat moved freely through the castle. The vault, she gasped. Someone's in the vault. The shadow creatures vanished the moment Serafina collapsed the barrier spell. Not destroyed, simply gone, pulled back like puppets on strings. The sudden silence was almost worse than the chaos had been. Serafina stood in the wrecked hallway, breathing hard, her entire body trembling with exhaustion. Evan steadied her with a hand on her elbow, his own face pale from blood loss. Around them, students sobbed. The infirmary was already overflowing with injured witches, their magical cores drained and flickering like dying embers. 17 more. Captain Maris reported grimly. Same symptoms as before. Complete magical exhaustion. Serafina's jaw tightened. 34 students in total now. All drained. All barely alive. And she still didn't know who was responsible. Where's Lily? Evan asked suddenly, his voice sharp with panic. The courtyard. I shielded her. Serafina turned, but her words died. Lily stood in the doorway, her small body rigid, her eyes rolled back until only the whites showed. Silver light poured from her skin like moonlight through cracked glass. Lily. Evan rushed to her, but the moment he touched her, he jerked back with a gasp. She's burning up. She's having a vision, Serafina breathed. A psychic vision. Lily's mouth opened, but the voice that came out wasn't her own. It was layered, dozens of whispers speaking as one. The thief walks in honored halls. Trusted hands hide poison claws. bleeding the queen while feeding the shadows. The vault key rests against his heart. The little girl collapsed. Evan caught her, cradling her against his chest as she gasped for air. Slowly, her eyes returned to normal, hazel instead of silver. "Papa," she whimpered. "I'm here, little bird. I'm here," Evan's voice cracked. Serafina knelt beside them, her mind racing. "Lily, what did you see?" The child looked at her with eyes far too old for her face. "Someone close to you. Someone you trust. He's been stealing your magic for months, feeding it to the shadows to make them strong enough to break through." "Who?" Serafina demanded. "Give me a name." "I don't know names," Lily whispered. "But he wears a silver key on a chain. And his hands. His hands are covered in old burn scars." Serafina's blood turned to ice. Silver key. Burn scars. Only one person in the entire academy matched that description. Master Kale, her royal advisor. The man who'd served her family for 30 years.
No Serafina Studebratli.
That's impossible. Kale has been loyal since before I was born. He taught me my first spell. Your Majesty, Evan's voice was gentle but firm. When was the last time you actually saw Kale during one of these attacks? Serafina opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. She couldn't remember. Every time the shadows struck, Kale arrived after. Always with perfect explanations. Always with suggestions that pointed suspicion elsewhere. At the new janitor. At her own failing powers. At student negligence. Never at himself. "He's been draining you directly," Evan said quietly. "That's why you're failing faster than the students. Every time he touches you, every spell consultation, every magical assessment, he's siphoning your power." Serafina wanted to deny it, but her hands were shaking, and deep down, she knew. The exhaustion, the memory gaps, the way her magic flickered whenever Kale performed his diagnostic spells. She'd been so blind. "The vault," she said suddenly. "If Lily's vision is right, he's there now, trying to take the kingdom's ancient spellstone." Captain Maris drew her sword. "We go."
Now.
But Evan grabbed Serafina's wrist, his expression urgent.
Wait.
"Your Majesty, I need to tell you something. About Clara. About the fire." "This isn't the time." It is Evan's grip tightened. Clara didn't just die saving witches. She died stopping a soul extraction ritual exactly like what's happening here. The people performing it wanted to harvest magical energy to fuel shadow creatures. They were building an army. Serafina's eyes widened. "You think Kale was involved?" "I know he was." Evan pulled a folded, scorched paper from his pocket. "I found this in the warehouse ruins. It's a partial ritual diagram with a signature at the bottom. I couldn't read most of it, but the name was clear. Kale Morvain, Consulting Magistrate." Serafina stared at the document, her mind reeling. "That's why you came here. You've been hunting him." "For 3 years," Evan's voice was raw. "I've followed every lead, every whisper. When I heard the Witch Queen's Academy was experiencing magical drain, I knew. I took the janitor job to get inside, to confirm it was him before making accusations against someone so powerful." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know if I could trust you." Evan met her gaze steadily. "But then I felt your fear in that throne room. Your desperation. And I realized you were another victim, not an accomplice." Lily stirred in Evan's arms. "Papa, we have to stop him. The shadows are hungry. If he opens the vault, they'll eat everything. The whole kingdom." Serafina looked at this exhausted father who'd lost his wife, who'd spent 3 years hunting justice, who just shared his own strength to keep her standing. She'd suspected him, tested him, doubted him, and he'd been trying to save her the entire time. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Evan shook his head. "Apologize after we win." Serafina smiled grimly and turned to Maris. "Gather everyone who can still fight. We end this now." The vault doors hung open like a wound. Serafina felt it before she saw it. The pull of ancient magic being ripped away, stolen, consumed. The air itself felt thinner, harder to breathe. Captain Maris and 4 guards flanked her. Evan walked beside her, Lily tucked safely in the infirmary under heavy protection spells. His shoulders were bandaged, but his eyes were sharp. Ready. They moved silently through the corridor. The walls were covered in scorch marks and claw scratches where shadow creatures had torn through. The protective wards that should have been impenetrable hung in tatters. At the vault entrance, Serafina held up a hand. Everyone stopped. Inside, she could hear someone humming. A familiar tune, the same lullaby Kale had sung to her when she was a child learning to control her first sparks of magic. Her stomach twisted. She stepped through the doorway. The vault was chaos. Ancient spellbooks lay scattered across the floor, their pages torn out. Enchanted artifacts had been smashed, their magic leaking into the air like blood. And in the center of it all, kneeling before the kingdom's spellstone, was Master Kale. He didn't look surprised to see her. "Ah, Serafina," he stood slowly, brushing dust from his robes. The silver vault key hung around his neck, and his scarred hands rested casually at his sides. "Right on time." "Step away from the spellstone, Kale." Serafina's voice was ice. "Or what?" Kale smiled. "You'll blast me with that flickering magic of yours? My dear girl, you can barely stand." It was true. Serafina's legs trembled. Her vision swam. Even with Evan's earlier support, she'd used too much power fighting the shadows. Kale had planned it perfectly. "Why?" The word tore from her throat. "You served my mother, my grandmother. You taught me everything I know. Why betray us?" "Betray?" Kale laughed, sharp and bitter. "I've given my entire life to your family. 50 years of service. And for what? To watch mediocre witches inherit power they didn't earn while I, the most skilled magistrate in 3 kingdoms, remained a glorified servant." "So, this is about jealousy?" Captain Maris growled. "This is about justice." Kale's eyes blazed. "I discovered the shadow summoning ritual 30 years ago. I perfected it. I learned how to harvest magical energy and reshape it into pure power. But when I presented my research to Serafina's grandmother, she called it abomination, locked it away, threatened to strip my title if I pursued it further." Serafina's fists clenched. "Because it requires sacrifice. Innocent lives drained to fuel your ambition. Necessary losses." Kale waved dismissively. "But I was patient. I waited. I watched 3 generations of your family waste the kingdom's potential. And then you took the throne. So young, so uncertain, so easy to manipulate. The diagnostic spells," Serafina breathed. "Every time you checked my magic, I was draining it, yes. Slowly, carefully. Just enough that you'd grow weaker while I grew stronger." Kale held up his hands, and dark energy crackled between his fingers. "I've been siphoning power from this academy for months. Students, artifacts, you. All of it feeding me and my shadow army." "You killed Clara Thorne," Evan said quietly. Kale's gaze slid to him. "Ah, the janitor. I wondered when you'd piece it together." "Yes, your meddling wife interrupted a ritual 3 years ago. Very inconvenient. I had to burn the entire warehouse to cover my tracks." Evan's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. "You murdered 12 people. I eliminated witnesses." Kale turned back to the spellstone, pressing his palm against its surface. "And now, I'll eliminate the evidence of my previous failure. Once I absorb the kingdom's magical core, I'll have enough power to reshape reality itself. The shadows will answer only to me." "You'll destroy the kingdom," Serafina shouted. "I'll remake it." Under proper leadership, Kale began channeling magic from the spellstone, his body glowing with stolen light. "Your bloodline ends tonight, Serafina. The shadows are already gathering outside. When I open the final barrier, they'll consume every living thing in this academy, including you." Serafina raised her hands, summoning what little magic remained. Violet sparks flickered weakly at her fingertips. "Not enough." She knew it. Kale knew it. He laughed. "How the mighty have fallen." Serafina's knees buckled. The room spun. She was going to collapse. Going to fail. Going to watch everything she'd sworn to protect burn. Warm hands caught her. Evan's hands. "I've got you," he whispered, the same words from before. "Just hold on." And once again, she felt it, that steady, impossible warmth. Not magic, but something just as powerful. His empathic gift, sharing strength, sharing hope, sharing the fierce determination of a man who'd already lost everything once and refused to lose again. Serafina's magic flared. Not violet anymore, silver and violet together, swirling like a storm. Kale's smile faltered. "What?" "You made a mistake," Serafina said, her voice steady now. "You assumed I'd face you alone." She raised her hand, now blazing with combined power, and smiled coldly. "I'm not alone anymore." Kale's eyes widened as he realized his fatal error. He'd spent months isolating her, weakening her, making her believe she had to carry everything herself. But he'd never planned for someone like Evan, someone who made her stronger just by standing beside her. "Now," Serafina said, "let's finish this." The battle was brief, but devastating. Kale summoned shadow creatures with desperate fury, filling the vault with writhing darkness. But Serafina, anchored by Evan's steady presence, burned through them like dawn-breaking night. Her magic, combined with Evan's empathic strength, created something neither had possessed alone. Every spell hit harder. Every barrier held stronger. When Kale tried to complete the absorption ritual, Serafina severed his connection to the spellstone with a blade of pure light. The backlash threw him across the room, his body slamming into the wall. The shadow creatures screamed and dissolved. Without Kale's stolen power feeding them, they couldn't maintain form. By the time Captain Maris and her guards secured him in binding chains, the first rays of sunrise were streaming through the vault's high windows. Kale looked smaller somehow, diminished. No longer the dignified advisor, just an old man consumed by bitterness. "You can't erase what I've done," he spat as the guards dragged him away. "The ritual exists. Others will find it. Use it. This isn't over." "Maybe not," Serafina said quietly, "but your pardon it is." She watched until he disappeared from sight, then finally allowed herself to collapse. Evan caught her before she hit the floor. "Easy," he murmured. "You did it." "We did it," Serafina corrected weakly. The academy spent 3 days recovering. Healers worked around the clock to restore the drained students. The council began the long process of repairing shattered wards. Investigators cataloged Kale's crimes and dismantled his shadow ritual notes. Serafina's magic slowly returned, the oppressive drain finally lifted. But she'd never forget how close she'd come to losing everything. On the 4th morning, she found Evan in the courtyard garden. He was packing a worn traveling bag, a few spare clothes, nothing that spoke of permanence. Lily sat nearby, picking flowers and braiding them into crowns with a focused intensity only children possessed. Serafina's chest tightened. "You're leaving?" Evan looked up, unsurprised. "Our work here is done. Time to move on." "What if I asked you to stay?" He paused, his hands stilling on the bag. "Your Majesty." "Serafina," she corrected. "After everything we've been through, I think we're past titles." Evan smiled faintly. "Serafina, you don't need me here. Your magic is restored. Kale is imprisoned. The academy is safe. Safe because of you." Serafina moved closer. "You risked everything, your safety, your daughter's safety, to stop him. You could have run, hidden, but you stayed and fought." "Someone had to." Evan returned to packing. "Clara would have wanted me to help." "And what do you want?" Serafina asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them. Evan looked at Lily, who was now showing her flower crown to a passing student. The young witch, recovered from the draining attacks, admired it with genuine delight. Lily beamed. "I want my daughter to be safe," Evan said finally. "I want her to grow up without running from shadows, without hiding what she is." Then stay. Serafina knelt beside him, meeting his eyes. I'm offering you both permanent residence in the academy. Magical protection. A real home. Evan shook his head. We're not witches. We don't belong. You saved this academy when my own council failed me. Serafina's voice was firm. Lily has a gift that protected everyone here. You both belong exactly as much as anyone else. The council won't approve. I'm the Witch Queen, Serafina smiled. I don't need their approval. Evan studied her face, searching for doubt or obligation. He found only sincerity. Why does this matter so much to you? He asked. Because you saw me at my weakest and didn't turn away. Because you shared your strength when you had every reason to protect it. Because for the first time in years, I don't feel alone. But Serafina couldn't say all that.
Not yet.
Because you're right, she said instead. I was drowning. I was so busy pretending to be strong that I forgot how to ask for help. You reminded me that strength isn't about carrying everything alone. Lily ran over, flower crown askew, breathless with excitement.
Papa.
The students invited me to their picnic. Can I go? Please. Evan looked at Serafina. She nodded. Stay in sight, Evan said. And if you sense any shadows, tell a teacher immediately. I know, Papa. Lily hugged him tightly, then surprised Serafina by hugging her too. Thank you for keeping us safe, Your Majesty. The little girl ran off before Serafina could respond. Evan watched her go, something soft in his expression. She's never had friends before. We've always moved too much. Then let her have them now, Serafina said. Evan was quiet for a long moment. Then he unpacked his bag. We'll stay, he said quietly. On one condition. Name it. You stop pretending you're fine when you're not. Evan met her gaze. I can feel when you're struggling, remember? Don't hide it from me. Serafina felt something crack open in her chest, some ancient wall she'd built around herself, finally beginning to crumble. I'll try, she promised. They sat together in the courtyard as the sun climbed higher. Across the garden, Lily laughed with her new friends, her flower crown glowing faintly silver in the light. For the first time in 3 years, Evan allowed himself to believe they might finally be home. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Serafina watched someone else's happiness and felt her own heart lift in response. She wasn't alone anymore. Neither of them were.
The end.